Hello, dear students, and welcome back to the series Modern Indian History. Guys, do you like watching movies, especially period movies? I am especially very fond of period movies or movies based on subjects of history. Mostly Hollywood, but sometimes Bollywood also once in a while comes out with good movies. And one such movie was Jodha Akbar. In this movie, I am particularly fond of one scene. Mahamanga, the foster mother of Akbar, is giving him a piece of her mind. She is advising him. She tells to a young impressionable Akbar, अगर हाकने वाला कमजोर हो तो घोड़ों और रियासतों को बिदकते हुए देर नहीं लगती. To translate that into English, if the person at helm is weak, then it does not take long before horses and empires rebel. Quite a prophetic advice, I would say. Precisely what was happening during the 18th century when the Mughals saw a decline. One after another, young Mughal princes were brought to the throne and disposed of by nobles. This is the story of 18th century when it comes to Indian polity, which we are trying to understand over here, guys. If you are new over here, then let me tell you that I, Jawwad Kazi, have started this series where we are discussing topics from this textbook, Modern Indian History by StudyIQ IAS. Guys, in my view, this textbook is the best resource that you can have for preparing modern India for civil services examination. Several of its features, which I have detailed in earlier lectures, make it a comprehensive resource for preparing this very crucial component, guys. And therefore, it is my considered view and suggestion to you that this is the one-stop solution that you have for preparing modern Indian history for civil services examination. You will definitely profit from ordering a copy for yourself. In our discussion thus far, guys, this is our third lecture in the series. We have seen how some of the later Mughals were brought to the throne and then disposed of. We continue that series, and today we are going to first meet the next one in that line, the unfortunate Shah Jahan III. You may be wondering that Shah Jahan I, and directly we are talking about Shah Jahan III. So who was the second fellow? Well, before Shah Jahan III, we have earlier in our last lecture discussed about one Rafiud Darjat. Rafiud Darjat additionally had the title of Shah Jahan II, and therefore this fellow is Shah Jahan III. He did not live long, neither did the third one last long on the throne. Perhaps 18th century did not like this title. Okay, that was just on a side note or on a lighter vein. He was a very weak ruler and had an exceptionally brief reign. Very soon, he was deposed by Rohilla chief Najib-ud-Dawla. Shah Jahan III was brought to the throne by Wazir Imad, the all-powerful megalomaniac and psycho Wazir Imad. Najib-ud-Dawla is the Mir Bakshi, and he is the Rohilla chief at that point of time. Now, what is meant by this term? Who were the Rohillas? The term Rohilla is derived from the word Ro, and Ro means mountainous area in Afghanistan. In the 15th, 16th centuries, a lot of these Afghans from the mountain areas, they came to India as soldiers of fortune. They served under the Lodis, then Sher Shah Soor, and subsequently under Mughals also. They were called as the Rohillas, and Najib Khan Rohilla is the chief of these Rohillas. Najib Khan is close to Ahmad Shah Abdali, the all-powerful Afghan ruler whom we have met in the last lecture. Whereas Wazir Imad had become close to Marathas. Through Imad, Marathas were calling the shots even in the court politics of Delhi now. You remember that agreement of 1752 which we saw last time? This had made Marathas the protectors of the throne of Delhi. They were given the responsibility of defending the Mughal dominion against foreign invaders, especially Ahmad Shah Abdali. So these two had a rivalry going, Najib and Imad. Najib is close to Ahmad Shah Abdali, whereas Imad is closer to the Marathas. Okay. Najib removes Shah Jahan III from the throne, deposes him, and in his place gets another Mughal prince, Shah Alam II, declared as the emperor. Shah Alam, we're going to meet him shortly, but before that, let us understand the politics that is going on over here. Ahmad Shah Abdali and his Afghan power is on the rise. And parallelly here in the subcontinent, the Marathas have become a very formidable force. So these are like two expanding spheres which necessarily had to come in conflict. The rising Maratha power and the rising Afghan power finally come to head in 1761 at the battlefield of Panipat. Why did this battle take place in the first place? Because Najib Khan Rohilla, he invites Ahmad Shah Abdali to India to deal with the Marathas, who have become so powerful that they are actually calling the shots at the Mughal court. Okay, and Marathas on the other hand have the responsibility of defending the Mughal dominion against any foreign invasion. So when Ahmad Shah Abdali comes with a large army once again to invade India to deal with the Marathas, it will lead to a very significant, very seminal and a massive conflict once again on the battlefield of Panipat. This place, Panipat, will once again be drenched in the blood of Indians, and another, very crucial battle will be fought on this battlefield. We'll see about that shortly. Let us now meet the next Mughal prince who is raised to the throne. Shah Alam II, or his real name was Ali Gauhar. Ali Gauhar was the son of Alamgir II, the person who was raised to throne earlier. Ali Gauhar, the word Gauhar, by the way, means a pearl. Ali Gauhar and Imad had a rivalry going. The megalomaniac Wazir Imad wanted to get rid of the young prince Ali Gauhar because he was a competent fellow and could have become a threat for Imad's control on the Mughal throne. And therefore, there was a conflict between these two, and Ali Gauhar decides that it's not safe for him to be there in Delhi, and he secretly escaped Delhi to go to the east, Purab as it was called. I mean, of course, it's called even now, but the eastern areas of the Mughal domain, they were referred to as Purab, and people from east were called as Purviyas. So Ali Gauhar decides to go towards Bihar and Bengal and consolidate his power over there so that he can come back and stake his control on the throne of Delhi. In the meantime, Imad himself has been forced to leave Delhi, and Najib-ud-Dawla has gained control over there. Najib-ud-Dawla declares him as the next Mughal ruler, and with the title of Shah Alam II. So I hope you got the idea of how the court politics was playing on. By this time, the entire idea of Mughal Empire had just become, a figment of imagination. The term empire or emperor had become fictional, and in reality, there was no such thing as such. Okay. In fact, there was a saying back then in Delhi, Sultanate Shah Alam as Dilli Tapalam, means the rule of the great Shah Alam is from Delhi to Palam. Palam was a village on the outskirts of Delhi, where the old domestic airport of Delhi is based. Now, of course, it is part of that entire growing city, but then back then it was a village on the outskirts. So barely the writ of Shah Alam runs from Delhi to Palam. That's all the limit. And the term Shah Alam means the ruler of the world. So the irony is being hinted at over here that he is the ruler of the world, whereas his writ runs only from Delhi to Palam. Okay. In this context, the third battle of Panipat was fought in 1761, 14th of January. Marathas had fielded a huge army to defend the Mughal dominion, or you can say Indian subcontinent, against an invasion that was coming from outside. It was an evenly contested battle. The Marathas could have won the day, or in fact on the given day they were appearing to be victorious, but then some strategic calculations on part of Ahmad Shah Abdali led to the defeat of Marathas, and it was definitely a crushing defeat on them. It was a shattering blow to the great Maratha Confederacy. Please remember this term, guys, Maratha Confederacy. The Maratha power in the 18th century under Peshwas is referred to as Confederacy because it was not a it was not a power that was very coherent. Within the Confederacy, there were many chiefs, and each of these chiefs, whether it was the Holkars, the Shindes, or the Gaikwads, they had a fair amount of autonomy in their own domains. Peshwa was their leader, but then individually in their distant areas, Holkars around Indore, Shindes around Gwalior, Gaikwads around Baroda, these people had substantial autonomy and power over there. And therefore, it is referred to as Confederacy in history books. Please remember the term. Ahmad Shah Abdali was able to win a very major victory over here, but he could not make any strategic benefit out of it. Because of domestic politics in Afghanistan, he had to go back to his country, to Afghanistan, leaving the field open for the Britishers to ultimately come to power. The Marathas suffered a shattering blow. They did revive briefly after that, but then they could never reach that zenith which they had achieved earlier, and this in a way paved the way for the Britishers to establish their rule in India. When we study the Maratha state, we will see all of these things in more detail. Now let us know a little bit more about Shah Alam. So this young prince, Ali Gauhar, had left Delhi fearing for his life, and when he was in the east, court politics changed and he was declared as the Mughal ruler with the title of Shah Alam. He is still not in Delhi. He is in Purab, trying to establish control or consolidating his power over there. You know, eastern areas, Bihar and Bengal, had been rich provinces for the Mughals always. And throughout medieval, you can see there have been many princes who have tried to regain power from the east. This history is just repeating itself. So he starts again a campaign to regain parts of Bengal. And in this effort, he is being supported by Najib Khan Rohilla. Now you understand the politics, why Najib is supporting him. And also the Nawab of Awadh, Shujauddaulah. Okay, so both of them are supporting. This brings the young prince in conflict with the British East India Company. By this time, that is 1757 already, Battle of Plassey has taken place and the ground reality of Bengal has changed. When Ali Gauhar goes over there to try to gain parts of Bengal and Bihar again, by that time, East India Company has become a very significant player over there. So he is going to come into conflict with East India Company. Through negotiations, Emperor finally recognizes Mir Qasim. Remember him from your school textbooks? He was established as the Nawab of Bengal by East India Company. So Ali Gauhar or Shah Alam II, he recognizes Mir Qasim as the Nawab of Bengal. But these arrangements do not, finally fructify. Mir Qasim rebels against the East India Company itself, and together with Shah Alam plus Shujauddaulah, Nawab of Awadh, these three together will form a major coalition and fight against East India Company at the Battle of Buxar in 1764. We are going to see these things in details when we see Anglo-Bengal wars. In this Battle of Buxar, as you all famously know, this coalition of the Mughal ruler, Nawab of Awadh and Nawab of Bengal saw a shattering defeat against East India Company. In fact, they had fielded a substantial army of about 40,000 troops against about 7,000 odd troops of East India Company. Yet, East India Company carried the day and this coalition lost. At the end of which, a treaty was signed between Shah Alam and East India Company, which is called as Treaty of Allahabad. As per this treaty, Diwani rights of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa were given to East India Company. Diwani rights. Now what is meant by Diwani rights? Remember the term? Diwani. Diwani rights here means the rights to enjoy the revenue of that province. Diwani rights. There were two types of rights and responsibilities basically. Diwani rights, that is right to collect revenue, and Nizamat. Nizamat is the responsibility to provide administration. So broadly, the medieval state functioned on these two pillars. Diwani, that is collecting of revenue, and Nizamat, that is providing overall administration. Now here by administration, I mean a broad term which includes all facets of administration. So these two areas a state has to provide. So when Diwani rights were given to East India Company, Nizamat responsibility was still with Nawab of Bengal. They only wanted to enjoy the revenue of Bengal. Secondly, the ruler Shah Alam was made a pensioner of East India Company and put up in the fort of Allahabad under East India Company's so-called protection. He would be housed at the fort of Allahabad and East India Company will be his protector. This was just a euphemism for a virtual prisoner. Basically, he was being transformed once again into a prisoner, this time his custody being with the foreign power of East India Company. Allahabad and Kora, these two districts, were given to Shah Alam for his maintenance, and these were taken away from Nawab of Awadh. He was also given an annual pension by East India Company of about 26 lakh rupees. So this was the term and condition that Treaty of Allahabad imposed upon Shah Alam. So for next few years, he will be putting up at the fort of Allahabad. Now look at the irony, guys. How times change. The fort of Allahabad, was a powerful fort constructed by his great ancestor Akbar. And in that very fort, he has become a virtual prisoner of a foreign power. Okay, could there be anything more ironic than that? I doubt. This was the Treaty of Allahabad that he had to sign. Subsequently, after the defeat of Marathas at Battle of Panipat, they once again bounced back. The Maratha power saw a resurgence. Although the flower of the army was lost, the exchequer had suffered a big drain. A lot of major, Sardars of the Maratha Confederacy had also, died on the battlefield. But nevertheless, they had the resilience to once again bounce back. Maratha power re-emerges in the decades to follow, especially under the chiefs like Shinde and Holkar. Mahaji Shinde, Sindhia family, I'm sure you would be knowing the royal family of Sindhias of Gwalior. The word Sindhia is the anglicized version of the word Shinde basically. Okay, so Shinde was the last name which during British time becomes anglicized to Sindhia. So Shindes once again revive, and under Mahaji Sindhia, the Mughal ruler Shah Alam, titular ruler of course, he was released from Allahabad under his protection and once again escorted back to Delhi. So under Maratha protection, he is now once again brought back to Delhi and made to sit on the throne. But of course, from here onwards, the control will be exercised by Marathas. His influence was limited only to Delhi. And this is what led to that famous saying which I earlier mentioned to you, Sultanate Shah Alam, as Dilli Ta Palam. Only that much. EIC ended the challenge of Mysore also during this period. We are going to see the Anglo-Mysore Wars. Fourth Anglo-Mysore War will take place during the reign of Shah Alam himself. Marathas were also humbled in the Second Anglo-Maratha War. We are going to see all of these wars in detail. In 1803, finally, Britishers are able to win Delhi itself. They are now under control. They have now taken control of Delhi proper also. So now, once again, Shah Alam, the ruler, will be under the control of East India Company because they have won Delhi. From whom? From the Marathas. Marathas were defeated in this Second Anglo-Maratha War, and consequently Delhi changes hands, and therefore Shah Alam will now be under the control of Marathas. Okay, 1806, Shah Alam finally passes away. This is the map of India, guys, that we see around 1760s after just the Battle of Buxar. A large swath of land, as you can see over here, is directly under the control of Marathas at that point of time. The Britishers have been able to establish themselves in sizable chunks in the eastern part of India. Below here is the power of Nizam, and below him is the state of Mysore. We are going to see these states also shortly, but this is what India appeared to be like during this particular phase. You can see here the fracturing of Mughal polity is now almost complete, and many different powers are ruling in different areas. I hope you got this, guys. A quick announcement before we go ahead. We are starting with our new batches for September. 11th of September is the day when we start a new batch. That is basically the same day when Swami Vivekananda had addressed that famous gathering at Chicago. So very auspicious and historic day in that sense. And from this day, our morning batch is going to start in Hindi, English, as well as English mediums. This batch is a one-stop solution, guys, for anybody who wants to take UPSC in 2024. It is loaded with a lot of features to ensure that your civil services dream gets the wing that it deserves. Okay. In the first phase of this batch, we are going to cover the foundation stage, where your preparation for prelims and mains is, the foundation of it is laid. Then we will get into the prelims mode from January onwards, so that you have sufficient practice and command over facts to confidently deal with prelims of 2024. Throughout this process, there will be constant tests, hand-holding through mentors, and a lot of other features which will ensure that your preparation is given the right sort of edge. Those students who crack the prelims and appear for mains in 2024 will also get a mains residential program, an all expenses paid mains residential program in Delhi, so that your preparation is enhanced to the level expected in mains. Along with peers, in the presence of teachers and mentors, your entire answer writing practice will be done there in Delhi itself. You'll be writing several hundred answers, so that when it actually comes to the exam hall, you will be confident to deal with any sort of question. Students cracking main examination will also be groomed and trained to confidently appear before the interview panel, and this is how the entire batch is going to go about, guys. It's a great opportunity for you. If you've not yet availed it, you're still in dual mind, I'll suggest that, winners always take action. Immediately register for this batch, and you can use my code for this, JD Live. This code will get you a handsome discount on the fees. Instead of 70,000 rupees, you'll get the course at only about 30,000. So I hope you make the most of this opportunity. Also, if you want to download the notes of this particular session, then you can use this QR code. Take a pause on this video, scan the QR code. It will take you to my Telegram channel, and from there you can download my notes and also remain connected with me as I post many other videos. Okay, let's go ahead now, guys. After the death of Shah Alam II, now by now Delhi and the Mughals are under the control of the East India Company. His son Akbar Shah II comes to power. 1806 to 1837 will be the period during which Akbar Shah will be the Mughal ruler, and by now, of course, the writ of the Mughal ruler is not even beyond the Red Fort. Okay, only the confines of Red Fort are under their control. Puppet and pensioner of British East India Company. There are a few facts that we must know from his period. The title of Raja was given to Ram Mohan Roy by Akbar II. Okay, title of Raja was given by Akbar II. A lot of students make the mistake of writing Raja Ram Mohan Roy like this. No, his name was not Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Okay, Raja was a title. Please remember that. Okay, and given by Akbar II. He had also sent him to England, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, to plead his case for enhanced pension before the Britishers. Okay. During this period, the Third Anglo-Maratha War was also fought, and finally, the Maratha power will come to an end, and on Pune, the Union Jack will be unfurled, and this will complete the consolidation of British power in the main part of the subcontinent. Now, Punjab and beyond are outside their control, but largely the entire subcontinent is under their control. फूल वालों की सैर. This was a festival that was started by Akbar Shah the second. So we must know this fact. Now, what was this Phool Walo Ki Sair? There's an interesting story behind that. So just allow me quick indulgence to share that with you. Akbar's son, one of his sons, had misbehaved with the British resident at the court. He had fired a gun at the British resident. Fortunately for the resident, he was not killed, but his security, guard, the person guarding him, he was killed in that process. So this prince was exiled from Delhi. He was made to go to Allahabad. The queen mother wanted the prince to come back. So she had taken a mannat at the shrine of Kutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki, the famous Sufi saint who has his dargah in the southern part of the south of Delhi, basically. Okay, so very famous saint, exactly where the Qutub Minar is also located. Now, after a few years, the Britishers allowed this young prince to come back to the capital of Delhi, to come back to Red Fort, and that is when the queen and king felt indebted to the Sufi saint, and they wanted to fulfill that mannat and visit that particular place. So the royal entire family, it traveled to south of that capital area, to Mehrauli area basically, and there they completed the mannat that they had taken. And when the news was known to people of Delhi that the royal family, the king, the queen, everybody are going to this particular Sufi shrine, then whole of Delhi, Hindus and Muslims alike, they turned out along with the royal family. So it was a grand festival. They paid their obeisance at the Sufi shrine, and Akbar, being a very secular minded person, he also offered obeisance at a nearby temple of Mahamaya, the famous temple over there. So he went to the Sufi shrine and also to that particular temple. And this was, like a symbol of that syncretism. Seeing the response of people of Delhi, Akbar decided that this festival must be held every year, where the flower sellers, Phool Walo Ki Sair, back then it was known as Sair-e-Gul Faroshan. Sair means, picnic or an outing. Gul is flowers. Farosha means sellers. So flower sellers ki sair basically. So this festival will be held every year, and it was done for a very long time. Later it was stopped after 1857. Again revived by Pandit Nehru in early 1960s. Okay, and since then officially the festival has continued annually. So there's this practice of sending a flower ka pankha, a fan made of flowers, to that particular temple, and a chadar to the Sufi dargah. So it's a symbol of basically Hindu-Muslim unity and a syncretic culture that India has. That is Phool Walo Ki Sair. Remember in whose time it was started. Okay. Lost right of minting coins. Earlier, the Mughals had the right of minting coins. There, as in, coins were minted in their name. Now, even that was stopped by the Britishers. Okay. He was basically a rubber stamp, completely under the control of British. Now, this brings us to the last Mughal ruler, namesake ruler, Bahadur Shah Zafar. Okay. Zafar was his pen name. Bahadur Shah Zafar was an accomplished Urdu poet. He has, written or composed a lot of poetry. Okay. He is a, very good Urdu poet. Many of his, ghazals are very, very famous also. His last Mughal ruler, accomplished poet, and at a ripe old age, on 10th of May 1857, when sepoys of East India Company from Meerut cantonment, they reached the Red Fort and woke up this old man and asked him to become the leader of that revolt. He grudgingly ultimately accepted the leadership. This showed, in popular perception, the political unity of India was still represented by the Mughals. The sepoys who had mutinied against the East India Company rushed directly to the Mughal, king, titular king, and asked him to take the leadership and transform their mutiny into a political action. He accepted the leadership, and after that, he wrote again what he could do. He could not fight. He did not have any resources. What he could do was pen some poems. So he wrote some shairi, basically to encourage the people to fight in this revolt of 1857. And one of his famous couplet is, जब तक गाजियों में बू रहेगी ईमान की, जब तक गाजियों में बू रहेगी ईमान की, गाजी मीन्स वॉरियर, ओके, जब तक गाजियों में बू रहेगी ईमान की, तख्ते लंदन तक चलेगी तेग हिंदुस्तान की. Okay, till that point where people have that faith in them, the warriors have faith in them, till that point the sword of Hindustan, India, will reach right up to the throne of London. So he composed such poetry. Unfortunately, the revolt was brutally suppressed by the Britishers. Delhi was their first target. North of Delhi, there's this famous Delhi Ridge. Over there was East India Company's cantonment. From there they attacked the old city of Delhi, Shahjahanabad, and then after a few months of fighting, finally they were able to wrest control of Delhi and Red Fort. Everybody, there was a mass slaughter ordered by the Britishers. Many people from the royal family were slaughtered, including several princes, sons of Bahadur Shah Zafar. Okay? And to add insult to injury, or to make matters even more poignant and worse, they had severed the heads of some of these princes and offered it on a tray to the old Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar. Finally, he was exiled from India and sent to Rangoon in Burma. And this Mughal, once upon a time, Mughal king, descendant of the great Akbar, he was sent away from Delhi in a bullock cart. Okay? And for a very long distance, he was made to travel, and then via the riverine routes, he was sent to Burma ultimately. And he lived the last few years of his life in Rangoon. ना किसी के आंख का नूर हूं, ना किसी के दिल का करार हूं, जो किसी के काम ना आ सका, मैं वो मुश्तो गुबार हूं. Okay, so I'm not the solace of anybody's eyes, nor am I, the solace of anybody's heart. I'm that piece of dirt which could not be useful to anybody. That is a poignant, you can say, couplet from one of his ghazals that he wrote in Rangoon, and finally died a heartbroken man surrounded by few members of his family. Gone were the days when the Mughals had ruled over the entire subcontinent, and now the last Mughal ruler, he was dying in utter poverty in a distant land. Okay, and he laments in his poetry that I could not even get a few yards of land in my homeland where my body could be buried. I will be buried in a distant land. I will not even get that honor or that solace of being buried in my homeland. Okay, so finally, the Mughal rule comes to an end, guys. So we have covered all of the later Mughals in this manner, starting with Bahadur Shah the first, and quite poetically, we end with another Bahadur Shah in the end. We have already discussed all of these Mughal rulers, so I will not go into revising any of these. You can watch the earlier videos. Let's take a few questions to ensure that you have understood the things very well. With reference to later Mughal period, who among the following nobles had raised Jahandar Shah to the throne? A. Sayyid brothers, B. Zulfikar Khan, C. Najib-ud-Dawla, D. Imadul Mulk. So, who had raised Jahandar Shah is the question. Now, I'm not going to tell you the answer. You are going to tell the answer in the comment box below. So let me know in the comment box below what is the answer to this question. And yes, I do watch and read the comments that you post over there. And I'm going to see how many of you have been able to give the right answer. It's an easy question. Even if you just revise the content that was shared earlier, you'll be able to answer this question, or you may not even require a revision also. One more question. Consider the following statements regarding rise of Maratha power in the 18th century. Two statements have been given to you. Maratha Prince Shahu was given the right to collect Chauth and Sardeshmukhi in Deccan by Bahadur Shah. Okay, Bahadur Shah the first, of course, here. So was he or was he not? Second, Shah Alam was the Mughal emperor when Marathas were given the responsibility of defending Mughal dominion against external invasions of Abdali. So two statements have been given to you. The first statement is wrong on the count that only Sardeshmukhi was given, and that too not whole of Deccan as such. So the first statement is wrong. Second statement, Shah Alam was not the emperor at that point of time. It was Ahmad Shah Bahadur who had given, in whose time Marathas were given this responsibility. Remember that agreement of 1752, that is the high watermark of Maratha power. So both the statements are wrong, and therefore answer is D. Neither one nor two is correct. Now let us see, guys, the opinions of historians regarding the decline of Mughal power. What are the opinions of different prominent historians? Why did the Mughals decline as such? During British times, the foremost historian of medieval India, especially that of Aurangzeb's period, was Sir Jadunath Sarkar. Okay? Sir Jadunath Sarkar is, the biggest authority on this subject in that particular period. Sir Jadunath Sarkar says that it was Aurangzeb's religious and Deccan policy that ultimately led to the decline of Mughals. Remember, guys, the history that we study is basically, what comes to us in the form of a school, college textbooks or notes is basically what the historians have written. The historians study original sources, and based on different and disparate pieces of information, they try to put together a coherent picture. So basically, history is the view of the historian, the way he has understood the different sources of that particular period. And consequently, different historians often have different views or pictures of history. Sir Jadunath Sarkar feels it was Aurangzeb's doing, his policies, which ultimately led to the decline of Mughals. His religious policy included, he was a devout Muslim, no problem with that, but then he was intolerant in many places. During his time, we have evidences of temple destruction. We have some examples where he, gave preferences to one community over another. So many such things happened during his period. There are counter things also. There are examples where Aurangzeb has given grants to temples as well. But largely, this hurt the sentiment of the Hindus, and Sir Jadunath Sarkar feels that this is a major cause. Second is his Deccan policy. I've told you in my last session, Sir Jadunath Sarkar calls Aurangzeb's Deccan campaign his Spanish ulcer. Okay, we have discussed how Napoleon got tied up in Spain and it led to, a lot of losses for him. Similarly, Sir Jadunath Sarkar says that Deccan became Spanish ulcer of Aurangzeb. From about 1682 to 1707 till his death, this entire period of 2.5 decades, Aurangzeb, the last 2.5 decades of his life, he spent over here in Deccan trying to subdue the challenge that Marathas had given. Please remember, 1680, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had passed away. It is after that he comes to Deccan. Okay, why did he come to Deccan? The immediate reason was, this is on a side note, the immediate reason was one of his son, Akbar, had rebelled against him and taken refuge in Deccan. And that is why, tracing him, he comes to Deccan. Second, he always had that grand ambition of finishing off the two Shahis of Deccan, Adil Shahi and Qutub Shahi. So that was one thing. And thirdly, the persistent challenge that Marathas under Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had given to Aurangzeb. So he wanted to deal with that, although Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had passed away by that time, but then he wanted to subdue the Marathas. So these reasons brought him over here and he never went back. In fact, he is buried here in Maharashtra itself in Aurangabad. Irfan Habib, another historian, says that agrarian crisis during the Mughal period became the reason for its demise. Irfan Habib is a Marxist historian, guys, a leftist historian. Now, who are Marxist historians? Karl Marx wears many different hats. Among other things, he is a historian also. And one of the fundamental approaches that Karl Marx has given is that we must look at history from economic perspective, economic dimension. And therefore, his name is given to the school of history, Marxist school of history, which prioritizes economic history over political history. economic, social, cultural, etc. Okay, so Irfan Habib comes from that school, leftist historian, and he naturally has investigated into economic factors and found that there was an agrarian crisis during this particular period. A lot of the policies of Mughals had led to a crisis in agriculture, and consequently the empire declines. So this is his approach. Second, Satish Chandra, contemporary big name in medieval Indian history. We read his textbooks. In fact, the old NCRT was written by Satish Chandra. He feels that Jagirdari crisis was the biggest reason. What was the Jagirdari crisis? We have understood Jagirdari system in the earlier lecture. During the latter half of Aurangzeb's period, there is a Jagirdari crisis where there is lack of good quality Jagirs. The number of Mansabdars kept on rising. You remember Akbar, the number of Mansabdars were around 1800. But during the time of Aurangzeb, it had shot up to 14,000 plus. Okay. Now, many of these Mansabdars had to be given Jagirs, and there wasn't sufficient number of Jagirs. Aurangzeb had to accommodate many new Mansabdars, people coming from the two Deccan Shahis, a lot of Rajputs. Families were expanding of the earlier Mansabdars. So there was tremendous pressure on Jagirs, and this led to a crisis leading to its ultimate decline. Shireen Musvi, another scholar with leftist, you can say from coming from that same leftist school, she has investigated the economic or monetary crisis during the Mughal period and attributed that as the reason. M. Athar Ali, another scholar of medieval India, he says that overall the backwardness in science and technology as compared to the West was rapidly advancing ahead. There was a scientific revolution in the West in 16th, 17th centuries. By the way, I have a parallel series of world history going on, and there in that series I have discussed this scientific revolution. I'll urge you to watch that series also. Link will be given in the description box. Unlike the West, India did not go through any such advancement in science and technology. Consequently, the Mughal India was technologically speaking backward, and therefore it met its demise. These are the opinions, broad opinions of major historians of this period. Now let us see some of the other causes that led to the decline of Mughal Empire. First and foremost, we have already discussed the role of policies that Aurangzeb had created. So we will not go into that again. Then comes the role of weak successors. Unlike their predecessors, the great Mughals, the subsequent Mughal rulers, barring some honorable exceptions, were generally weak, indolent, and pleasure-loving. Gone were the days of rulers like Babur, who used to himself join his soldiers in the back-breaking exercise of, stomping down snow to make way for his cannon guns. Gone were the days of people like Akbar, who was a exceptionally skilled marksman and a great horse rider. Gone were the days of Shah Jahan, who was himself a very good warrior. Now the Mughal princes had been brought up in luxury, and they had completely lost touch with military skills as well as with governance and administration. So they were completely unfit to rule, and consequently the nobles could take advantage of them. Therefore, we see the rise of influence of several nobles. We have discussed the kind of negative impact nobles had on the court politics of the Mughals. We have seen the role of Zulfikar Khan. We have seen the Sayyid brothers. We have seen how Imad was able to bring to throne and then depose of multiple Mughal princes. All of this happened because of the weakness of the Mughal princes. Then tussle between the different factions of Mughal nobility. We have understood that the Mughal nobility was not homogeneous. It did not have a common national character. There were multiple factions and groups. Turanis, Iranis, Afghans, Indians, and then also Rajputs, even Marathas towards the end. These were different factions that were there in the Mughal nobility. These factions had their own self-interest. They allied, they counter-allied, and all of this made the empire weak from inside. Then problems in economy and administration. We have discussed the Jagirdari crisis. The number of mansabdars was increasing from 1800 in Akbar's time to 14,000 plus in Aurangzeb's times. The number had shot up. But parallelly, the number of jagirs, those jagirs from where surplus could be gained, that number of jagirs had not proportionately increased. So there was a constant conflict to get access to best jagir. These jagirdars were often exploiting the peasants. Jagirdars wanted to make the best of their limited opportunity of having that jagir. Jagir could be taken back anytime. Jagirs were transferable. All of this led to pressure on the peasantry. Lavish expenditure of the ruling elites. They lived a life of, comfort and a lot of luxuries. This naturally was very expensive and not sustainable. Loss of Khalisa lands. Another term here, Khalisa. The word Khalisa comes from the root Khalis, which means pure or exclusive. So Khalisa lands were those lands that were directly under the crown and not given as jagirs to anybody. But since the number of jagirs was reducing, finally land from the Khalisa had to also be given to the important jagirdars. No science or technological advancement. We have seen this reason earlier also. Weakening of tax base. As time passed or as time advanced, we see that many autonomous states were born. Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad, and all of these areas stopped slowly the resources being sent to center. Naturally, the tax base for the Mughal state was reducing because of this. Many battles were being fought at this point. These battles internally weakened the Mughal Empire. Wars of succession, wars between nobles, all of this ultimately weakened the Mughal army. These wars were cannibalistic wars where the Mughals were fighting amongst themselves. These were naturally not healthy for the Mughal state. Treasury was getting drained away because of all of these wars. Consequently, we see that foreign invasions were attracted towards India. First, Nadir Shah in 1739, I told you he took away 75 crore worth of jewels from India. The Peacock Throne, the Kohinoor, the Darya-e-Noor, all of these famous jewels were taken away from India. Delhi was actually made completely bare of its wealth. Ahmad Shah Abdali, he came to India 8 times, as many as 8 times he ransacked India. So these foreign invasions also. Then ineffective army. The Mughal army was a pale shadow of what it used to be during Akbar, Jahangir and Shah Jahan's times, even Aurangzeb's for that matter. Now the Mughal army was just a ragtag crowd. And this was even more serious compared to what the Europeans had advanced in terms of military science. Europeans had developed new techniques and weapons of fighting. Now they did not require numbers. Very few but well-trained and disciplined soldiers could take on much bigger armies. And this will prove fatal during the subsequent wars. You see the wars in Carnatic, how the East India Company and French Company were able to amaze the Indian powers. Just 700 soldiers, only 700 soldiers had defeated an army of 12,000 plus at Battle of Amber. In Battle of Buxar, 7,000 British troops. Not all British, of course, only officers were British. Troops were Indians, but then trained on European lines. 7,000 troops were able to defeat Indian army of 40,000 plus. Why was it possible? Because of the training and discipline that was instilled. Mughal army, on the other hand, did not have that sort of advancement. It lost several wars and consequently its prestige and morale was very low. It lacked a national character. As I told you, different nobles, different soldiers, they were loyal to their own chiefs, not loyal to a larger empire or the idea of being Indians as such. There were multiple racial and religious groups also. So Afghans, you had Turanis, you had Iranis, you had Indians, you had many other different races. All of that led to lack of coherence in the Mughal army. There was therefore a lot of internal struggle amongst the armies also, and this reduced their efficiency on the battlefield. Rise of regional aspirations. Seeing the decline or the slow demise of the Mughals, many regional powers felt that it was their opportunity to actually strike and win their freedom. Many of these powers they asserted in the 18th century, whether it was the Jats, Sikhs, Marathas, many others, Afghans, they went on to create their own states because regional aspirations were on the rise during this period. So these multiple reasons, guys, ultimately led to the decline of the great Mughal Empire in 18th century and ultimately paved the way for rise of Britishers. While there were many Indian regional powers who could knock down the Mughal Empire, there was hardly anybody who could actually replace it in time. The Britishers, the Europeans were already knocking on the doors of India's, power vaults, and before anybody could fill into the shoes of Mughals, East India Company was able to occupy that void and become the, British Raj, so to speak, of India. In our next lecture, guys, we are going to discuss how many Indian regional powers will rise during the 18th and 19th century. We will talk about the different types of Indian powers, who were the successor states, who were the rebel states, who were the independent states, and note each one of them and their initial developments in detail. I'll see you in my next class, guys. Do remember to like this video and also share it with your fraternity of civil services aspirants so that more students can benefit. If you've watched this lecture till this point, that I'm sure you found a lot of value in it, I'll really appreciate if you can leave some comment in the comment box below. It really motivates the faculties to churn out very good quality content, guys. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next session.